I've been always after something like a deeper truth, an ecstatic truth. I've been after balance, after something like.
What is truth? A finite thing that can be recorded and explained, or something deeper, spoken not through words, but through feelings and perspectives? In the mind of world-renowned filmmaker Werner Herzog, truth transcended both of these ideas. For Herzog, truth wasn't a destination, but a journey, a walk through discomfort that could lead further than any surface-level fact could articulate. It would be a question that defined his work both as an artist and a traveler, and one that had no answer, but the road he traveled to find it. Werner was born on September 5, 1942, in Munich, Germany, but spent most of his childhood in Sachsen, a small village nestled in the mountains in Bavaria, where his mother brought him 2 weeks after his birth to escape the Allied bombing raids in World War II. It was here that he'd spend the first 12 years of his life, secluded in a quiet mountain valley, with a growing curiosity of the world that waited for him beyond it. His first encounter with cinema came in 1953, when he was 11 years old. A traveling projectionist had come to visit his school with 2 short films to present to the students. One illustrated a group of Eskimos building an igloo, and the other showed pygmies in Cameroon crossing a river in the jungle. Instead of finding this material inspiring, however, Werner recounts the films as underwhelming, stating, quote, "They didn't impress me. I didn't think the filmmakers did a good job," end quote. Growing up in the mountains, Werner was all too familiar with snow, and felt the filmmakers had failed to capture what the genuine experience of snow was like. But what he did discover that day was a question that would momentally impact his later work. How can images convey the truth of experience itself? Werner would remain in Sachsen until the late 1950s, when he and his family would return to Munich, a city still reeling from the destruction of World War II, yet radically advanced beyond the life he had been raised into up in the mountains. He enrolled in the University of Munich, studying history and literature. However, he would repeatedly state throughout his career that formal education was never central to him. Moreover, he would openly discourage aspiring filmmakers from attending film school, stating that in his view, institutional knowledge felt secondary to lived experience. In 1962, he famously stole a 35mm camera from the Munich Film School, which honestly is pretty rad, and with it would make his first short film, Heracles. It's moments like these that really beat the battle drums of Herzog's story. From the start of his career in film, he wasn't interested in following crowds or pleasing politicians, so to speak. Werner was in it as an independent, someone who decided to make their own rule, break barriers, and occasionally laws, in his pursuit of capturing a deeper meaning in film, something both personal, existential, and unapologetically raw. As established in Part 1, Werner faced a pivotal culture shock upon his family's return to Munich. Entering the modern world, he observed how systems designed to provide comfort and convention could curtail real-world experience. As he began making films, a sub-question from those observations would emerge. What is truth, really, and how can cinema reach it? Herzog grew increasingly dissatisfied with the assumption that truth could be found simply by following the facts. To him, facts describe the basis of what happened, not the truth of what it felt like. It was on this existential journey to finding a deeper truth that he famously coined the term ecstatic truth, to describe a more poetic, emotional truth that he saw beneath the surface of basic facts. Using this term as a guideline for his cinematic work, he would go on to explore the depths of lived human experience, with a keen focus on the complex extremes of human emotions, motivations, and perspectives. For Werner Herzog, documentary filmmaking was never about capturing the facts as they lay on the surface of reality. It was about questioning what lies just below its surface, a deeper, grittier truth that could only be discovered by those willing to look directly into the eyes of chaos, obsession, and consciousness. With ecstatic truth as his guiding force, Herzog was able to illuminate the dark underbelly of human experience. One of the more powerful tools he regularly uses was exploring moments of silence with the people he interviewed, and he does so very strategically. There's an old saying that goes something along the lines of, "Eyes can speak what words won't," and that is exactly what those pauses of silence accomplish. Rather than cutting away after a subject finishes speaking, Herzog often allows the clip to linger for a while longer, maybe as he's checking his notes or preparing for the next round of questions. But it's what the subjects behind the camera do in those moments that is incredibly fascinating. It forces his interviewees to confront their own thoughts in real time, with the audience sitting front row to witness the external view of it. The silence becomes a mirror of their own subconscious, and more than often provides a deeper insight to the answers they just gave. In his 2005 documentary, Grizzly Man, analyzing the isolative mind space and horrific death of Timothy Treadwell, Herzog didn't have the option of interviewing Treadwell himself, but he did have over 100 hours of footage recorded by Treadwell himself as he documented his life in the Grizzly Sanctuary. Yet throughout the film, most of what we see aren't the clips Treadwell intended for use. It's the silence in between takes, and the almost video diary type entries that give us a window into his mind. Moments I'm sure Timothy Treadwell never imagined anyone would take interest in, but that inadvertently gave us the answers as to why he was out there to begin with. These moments of internal reflection completely changed the narrative of the film. From a story about a nature enthusiast who stepped too close to danger, to a story about a man's struggle with finding meaning in the modern world, and a catastrophic miscalculation about the natural world beyond it. Herzog's 2011 documentary, Into the Abyss, uses the same strategy as he questions inmates Michael Perry and Jason Burkett about the triple homicide which they have been convicted of. While Jason seems to show signs of internal emotional struggle, Michael's reaction to these periods of silence shows something far more terrifying. His gaze never leaves Herzog. Sitting behind a sheet of glass, he studies him closely, watching his every move, and calculating his next response accordingly. His silence showcases his deception, a trait his narcissism would never allow him to admit to. At the very start of the film, Herzog interviews Reverend Richard Lopez, a chaplain at the prison where Michael and Jason are held. He holds the interview in the cemetery outside the prison, where the unclaimed remains of death row inmates are buried, marked not by names but by numbers, carved into the same assembly line crosses, which stretch out as far as the frame can see. During his periods of silence, an expression of pain seeps to the surface from somewhere inside, before he gazes hauntingly out at the headstones that surround them. Similarly, at the end of the film, Herzog interviews Fred Allen, a former captain of the Texas death house where death row inmates are executed. Instead of spending most of the time digging into the specifics of his work, however, Herzog focuses his question on the emotional toll the job has had on him. Allen participated in the executions of over 120 inmates before quitting his job, and he describes the emotional consequences the work has had on him as an individual. Where many documentarians might have framed him as an expert opinionist, Herzog allowed Allen's hesitations and emotional silences to become part of the story, revealing an ecstatic truth about the psychological cost of participating in institutional killing. It's a film centered around the death penalty in Texas and the cyclical nature of violence. But taking into account these unscripted moments of reflection, the film reaches deeper than that. It becomes a film about the irreversibility of death and the psychological exhaustion it leaves behind. While writing the script for this video, I considered a handful of specifics to focus on when analyzing Werner's work, but in the end, I decided I wanted to focus on his use of silence. And I chose that because I think it's these moments that really highlight what sets Werner apart from other documentarians. And that's not just his ability to do more with less, but his distinct choice to do so. Throughout his documentaries, you won't find any overly dramatic music, casted reenactments, or otherwise theatrical additions to his stories. What he places his focus on are moments of human connection, or disconnection, and the impact they have on their surroundings. He has an ability to reach inside people's hearts and minds, often without them even knowing, and through that, enables them to tell their story before they realize they've told it. One of the most interesting parts is you can listen to him do this during his interviews. There comes a point in his questions where it's almost like he slowly reaches forward and pulls down a mask from his subjects, revealing subconscious feelings, thoughts, and emotions that are the true drivers behind how we experience and cope with the world as human beings. From my perspective, I believe that is the secret to his ecstatic truth, and that is what makes his work feel so personal. Werner Herzog is a documentarian that does not seek to expose, but to understand. He is a man driven by empathy, and a curiosity that often takes him to the depths of human consciousness. Someone who travels the world in search of extremes and then willingly places himself in the middle of it. As of January 2026, he has produced 34 feature-length documentaries, a decent collection of documentary shorts, and 23 feature-length narrative films. He currently lives in Los Angeles, California, with his wife, Lena Herzog. Before we end this thing, I couldn't figure out where to put this in the video, but I would be doing you a terrible disservice by not talking about the 1979 masterpiece, Werner Herzog Eats His Shoe. Long story short, in 1979, Herzog made a bet with fellow filmmaker and close friend, Errol Morris. At the time, Morris was struggling with completing his feature-length documentary, Gates of Heaven, a project that Herzog especially believed in. But Herzog doesn't believe that art moves forward through funding, encouragement, or institutions. No! In his eyes, our true motivators are obsession, risk, and an irrational belief of what comes after. And it was in these circumstances that Herzog made a promise to his friend. If you finish this film, I will eat my shoe. And finish the film Morris did. So Herzog did exactly as he promised. He seasoned and cooked his leather boots in a large pot along with some beans, and ate it up before a live audience, who had gathered to see the premiere of Gates of Heaven. The entire ordeal was documented by Les Blank. It's incredible. You can find clips from the documentary short on YouTube, but the full documentary is unfortunately held behind a paywall still, which I can't really blame him for. Such a treasure as this could never be free. Well, my friends, that is all I have for you today. I hope you have been entertained. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I'll see y'all in class.
I didn't mean to eat this shoe in public. I intended to eat it in a restaurant, but I was pushed a little bit into it, and it makes sense to some extent because it should be an encouragement for all of you who want to make films and who are just scared to start and who haven't got the guts, so you can follow a good example. And I think it should also, I do this here in public.